Hello, this is screencast number 2 in Aurelia 2 for Smarties project structure, finding your way around in Aurelia Project. So, before you begin, you need to have Visual Studio Code installed. If you want to follow along, there's a bazillion different code editors, and you are certainly free to use your editor of choice. Mine just happens to be Visual Studio Code. So we're going to start in the directory that we created after our last episode in which I showed you how to create the app. So this is the My App folder, and I'm simply going to right click and say Open with Code. So over here, it opens up that folder and it shows you everything that's in this folder. So this is a high-level look at the important folders. The first folder is the node modules, which of course are all the supporting libraries installed by npm. And then there is the src source folder, which is where your source code lives. So really any code that you're writing, HTML, CSS, TypeScript, is all going to be in the source folder. There's another folder called test for doing your automated UI testing. And then there's another folder created called dist distribution, which gets created after you created the distribution. So let's look at those folders. All right, so here is the node modules folder. A lot going on. Not too worried too much about that. The source folder. And this is the most important folder. And then there's the test folder that I mentioned. And right now it just has a couple of files in there. So in the source folder, there's 4 files which are the most important. Main.ts is the entry point for all Aurelia apps. So this is where it all starts. So say, for example, you're trying to debug your app because it's just not starting up. Well, main.ts is the place to go. All right, so once main runs, really all it does is it passes it off to your specific application. So in this case, it's called myapp.ts, but it would be whatever the name of your application is. So along with myapp.ts always lives a HTML file to match. So that's one of the overriding themes of Aurelia is you have your view, which is the HTML, and you have your view model, which is the TypeScript file. So what happens is when you run my app, Aurelia goes off and says, oh, hey, where's the myapp.html? I need to display that. So that continues on as a theme. So if you have a page 1.ts that you navigate to with your router, well, of course, it looks for the associated HTML to go along with that. So that's all going back to the whole, model view model pattern that was started some years ago and has gotten quite popular. Now, along with that, it also goes and looks to see if there's a CSS file of the same name, and if so, then it loads that up. That's actually a new feature, in Aurelia 2 that wasn't present in Aurelia 1. So in Aurelia 1, inside of your index file or inside myapp.html, you would have had to have included a reference to myapp.css, but this is a little more clever way of putting it. So that's where your CSS can live for your application. So let's take a deeper dive into those files. So here we have main, and notice it's a surprisingly short file. there's just really not a whole lot going on here. So as you can see, it's importing Aurelia. That's basically say it's, hey, give me the whole framework, and then it's importing your specific application name, my app, and then it says Aurelia, and it says app, and that defines which what you want to start up, and then it says start. So that's amazingly sweet and concise, and I think that's pretty cool. All right, so over here, let's go on to the next file, my app. So this is obviously a very simple, it's just got hello world going on in here. So usually this is where you'd be instantiating your router and, setting up, a number of other things, which we'll get into in, later episodes. All right, and so then let's look at CSS. So all we have is one class here, message, which has got a background color. So, again, like I said earlier, this just makes it so it gets automatically included, in these files here. And then we look at the HTML. So we have a little bit going on. So obviously the class is message to give it the formatting. And then we have this clever little thing here. It's the $sign, and then it's the curly braces, with this parameter there in the middle. And so what it's doing is Aurelia is going, oh, I need to write something to the screen there. Well, let me go look inside my app over here and see what the value is that it should be. So here, as you can see, it says hello world. So what that is a good example of binding. We created this variable, or this, whatever you want to call it over here. And then we want to display it over here. So that again is an overriding theme of your binding from the view model to the view. So typically you'll have, like, if you have a grid, you'll have a collection of business objects, and that you've gotten from the database, and then you display that, so you have, it's not just a variable over here, or a property, it's like it's an array. So you populate your array, and then over in your HTML, you have like a for loop, or, one of the other constructs um, that display all your data, or perhaps you have, a grid, and you just define the data source as the, say you have a property called messages, which is your array, and then, it displays that. So that again is also a very important element of Aurelia apps, is that whole binding process. Because, if at, runtime, you have this public message, but you say now hello world, and maybe you want to add the time or a date or something on there in code, you do this, but then your HTML in the app while it's running gets automatically updated, but all you had to do was do the $sign and the braces, and it gets written to the screen. This is a process known as interpolation. All right, so there's a few other important files in your project. These aren't necessarily used at runtime, but they're used in the developmental environment. And it's important that these files are in place and correctly configured. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to build and run the project. So let's review those briefly. So here is your package.json file that got created when you created the project, and it puts all this stuff in there. Your developmental dependencies, scripts that you might want to run, and I'll show you that in a minute. Yeah, so really that's about it. The only dependency at this time is, just Aurelia. The rest of those are developmental dependencies. So, that just are files and libs that keep your developmental environment running. But then at runtime, this is the only one that's going to end up getting bundled. All right, so you have that one. You have tsconfig, which just is your TypeScript configuration. It tells you what to include. Some files here, some compiler options. So you can just pretty much leave that at the defaults. No worries. And then you have Webpack, and this is what is used when you're creating your single page app. So it goes in and it uses all of these now. Webpack is a whole subject into itself, and we're not going to get into that here. But in general, you don't need to worry about it. Maybe you want to go in and change your port number if you didn't like port 9000 for something where it conflicted with some other, project that you have running. But really, the only important thing to know about Webpack is you have two different environments. You have your production environment and you have your developmental environment. And when you're in development, it like the files are compiled a little bit differently, so you can do debugging. But then at production time, you want a lean and mean development. All right, so those are the most important things. You do also have this distribution folder that was created when I ran a script down here. And in the next episode, we'll talk about running these NPM scripts, and we'll show you what you can do with those. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.